Okay, so we're back. We'll see. We'll see if this works. The amazing internet connection in Casper, Wyoming, where I'm coming to you from, isn't always the best. So, which is why I'm in the car too. So, you were saying that you grew up in Lone Jack, and that your dad instilled that work hard ethic in you, and that kind of shaped who you were. So, kind of pick up from there, and let's keep going and see what happens.
Okay, we're going to talk about like leading into kind of where I'm at DJing wise. Is that kind of what you want to know? Okay, cool. So yeah, like I said, grew up in Lone Jack. Obviously, did all the things that kids do in Lone Jack. Played sports, played baseball, football, all of that kind of stuff. Was a drummer in the jazz band at school, so that was kind of cool. And then when I graduated, what's that?
Jazz hands.
Yeah, exactly. So when I graduated, my backstory is probably a lot different than a lot of people's, because even though my dad, the older I've gotten, the more I've loved him. But early on, he was tough on me. He was really tough. And so that caused a little bit of conflict, as I was a teenager. And so I actually finished high school not living in my home. And because of that, I think I had to grow up a lot faster than a lot of people probably did. And so I jumped right out of high school, went into community college, and started just looking for, work opportunities. For me, that meant picking up, obviously, what was paying the most money at the time for a kid directly out of high school. So I jumped into Sprint at a call center there. And from that point on, I just was given a lot of opportunities just through people I knew. It was really basic networking. And so I got the opportunity to work on the technical side at Sprint, doing a lot of networking and analytical work, which took me into translations and really just started kind of getting me used to the corporate world. And so at the time, I really thought I was going to be working my way up the corporate ladder. I mean, that's honestly what I thought, And, through Sprint, everybody knows somebody that works at Sprint, and everybody's heard, sometimes you're working there, sometimes you're laid off. That's just kind of the way it is. And I love Sprint. I will say to this day, I still thought that job was great, but there was a lot of up and downs. And so, through one of those layoff periods, I just took it upon myself and I said, hey, you know what is something I always really have loved? And really what that was music. And so I started looking for opportunities as I was trying to look for my next move, going, what do I want to do with myself? And from that point, I just said, I saw an ad for DJs, and I know nothing about DJing, but I know it involves music. So I jumped in and I went and I interviewed, and that company picked me up, and I DJed there for about 6 to 8 months. And I really there were certain things I loved about it, and there were certain things I didn't like about it. And the more I got into DJing, the more I really started liking the culture of DJing. Not so much just the act of doing it, but it was the culture. So seeing people doing things that were really creative and cool, live mashups, live remixes, that's kind of where my heart was. And I really liked that. And I didn't feel like I could express myself doing it that way at private events. And, you got to think at the time, this was like early 2000s. So it's a little bit different. I think we talked about this before, where DJing was at that time. It was like you had club DJs and then you had private event DJs, but those two worlds didn't mix a lot. And so for me, the creative part of it, seeing people do things live, that's what I was all about. That's what I was passionate about. And I was really into, DJ AM and Jazzy Jeff, and I was into DJ Z Trip and watching these guys do things that I just didn't even know were possible. So I started kind of pursuing that route. Obviously, I went back into the workforce because at the time, I didn't even know that you could make a living doing this. It was just kind of like a side hobby. And so I went back into the workforce, and I just kept pursuing that art of creating or kind of understanding how these guys are doing this. How are they mixing music? How are they sounding so different than anything I've ever heard? And I jumped into the nightlife world once I picked up on that craft, and I started playing a lot of bars. I started playing a lot of nightclubs. And it was kind of like we talked about earlier, one of the things that was so tough for me was it was just the disorganization and just kind of the overall attitude of the people I was working with in the nightclub scene. And so that led me to go back into the private event world. And when I got back into the private event world, for me, I really felt like being a type A personality and being creative is kind of an unheard of thing. And I said, I am that guy. So my goal was to take the professionalism and facilitation that you should get on the day of your wedding, combine that with a DJ that was fundamentally sound and being able to mix great music together and combine those worlds. And they weren't currently being done that way. And so for me, that was kind of my entry point into taking this into my own business.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I know it's a super long answer.
It's your story. That's what I hear. So, well, and it was interesting too because, and I always kind of do a little bit of a pre-interview just to kind of get to know a person before we do the real interview. And one of the questions that I like to ask is always, did you have a mentor that kind of shaped you and molded you? And as you were sharing that story, it became apparent to me that you have a very different answer to that question. So share that with everybody.
Oh, you mean now as opposed to earlier?
Yeah. So tell them how you answered that, because it really ties in with, how you transition from being in the corporate world into being a DJ for yourself.
Well, from what we talked about, I think I answered that originally just saying, no, I don't have a mentor per se. And, when I think about a mentor, I think about somebody that's really taken you under their wing and kind of showed you the ropes, showed you the easier path to success. And that wasn't my case. I mean, I think if I look back, and I actually thought about this after we talked, and I look back kind of on my life and I go, am I lying to myself here? Was that really not the case? And kind of going back to my mom and my dad. So they've been married my whole life. I grew up in a regular family, but our family wasn't a family that had a lot of money. We had the things we needed. We had shelter, we had food, but there really weren't a lot of extras. So from a really early age, my dad just really, he taught us that we needed just to work. You worked. It was just what he knew. And I think that because he taught us how to work so hard, it allowed me to put in the effort and the time to get to kind of where I'm at this point. But, a quick story, just kind of give you, it's crazy like now, because I'm only 35, so it's not like I'm like 50 years old or 60 years old and thinking back to my youth. But like when I started, working, I was in second grade. I started working mowing yards, and so the lady across the street from me, her name was Opal Beard, and she was like a second grandma to me. She was awesome. And I mowed her yard from the time I was in second grade until the time I was 22 years old. And that's just the way my dad had kind of brought us up. So when I think about like having a mentor from a business standpoint, I think the answer to that is no. But I think from an early age, my parents putting that work ethic into me kind of gave me the persistency to, grow a business. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because as we've talked, I think that's a common theme, that somewhere along the road, most successful entrepreneurs, whether it's on a personal level or on a business level, have that mentor that either taught them how to work harder or smarter. And if you didn't get both from that mentor, you end up learning the other one as you're going.
Yeah, and my dad was the harder. It wasn't the smarter. He's a smart man, but it wasn't the, if we had a backhoe and a ditch needed to be dug, I'd be out there with a shovel. I was never going to be doing it with the best tools. He was just that way. But he definitely did teach me how to work extremely hard. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, and that's valuable. So, yeah. So, and so what was interesting in our previous conversation was that your answer to that was about your love for entrepreneurship.
Oh, sure.
And just the fact that there's, we've kind of talked about in other interviews that there's this artist in most of us that are in the wedding industry where we love what we do. So you love music, you love the side, but there's also this part of us that is kind of the owner manager. And I think that's kind of what you spoke to earlier when I asked that question, and kind of talk about how that's evolved.
Becoming the owner manager as opposed to the actual artist part itself. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
What is it that intrigues you about being an entrepreneur?
What do I love about being an entrepreneur? I think, honestly, being an entrepreneur and being creative go extremely hand in hand, I'll be honest with you. Because when you think about being a creative, you're wanting to create. That's what you're wanting to do. And it doesn't matter which media you use to do that. The whole goal is to start from nothing and to have something that I'm getting a lot of echoing right now. So try the headset.
I'm not getting any echoing from you. That may just be on your end. But when you backed away from the microphone a little bit, it started to be a little bit harder. So maybe
okay, let me see if it helps. I'll try to make it through the echo to the best of my ability. I think it's too. I think it goes hand in hand. For me, I just like creating things out of nothing. I like taking an opportunity, a thought of something that's needed in this world or needed in this market, and going, what can I do to make that be successful? And so even from early on when I started this, DJ company, my goal wasn't to be a 60-year-old DJ. And I think that I'm a little bit different in that aspect, not because there's anything wrong with that. I don't want to. So sometimes I say things where people probably go, gosh dang it, Craig, like you're being rude here. And I don't mean to be that way in any way, shape, or form. But my goal was always to create a company that could sustain itself. And so as an entrepreneur, for me, there's so much strategic thinking that goes into kind of what I do that really, that's what keeps me going. I love the fact that every event that we do, we have couples. This just humbles me to no end, but we have couples, because I'm not this guy. We have couples that they write us great reviews. They tip our DJs. They've paid us to do the event. And then we ask them, hey, would you come in and do a video review for us? And they go, yes, we would like to do that. And then they take time out of their schedules. They come in and they review us on video because they're so thankful for the work that we put in for them. And to me, that is such a humbling experience. We have thousands of those people that are willing to do that for us. And so this business is a little bit different because there is that emotional connection. But what I love about it is I'm still able to pursue, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, what I want to as a manager, but still have that emotional connection to my clients. And at the end of the day, still have a creative aspect, which is the music too. So I think overall, those things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. So who are you outside of your work? What else do you like to do?
Man, it used to be a lot more when I had more time on my hands, but I've realized that my social life is lacking. First and foremost, I'm a husband and I'm a father. I mean, I think, somebody told me one time, they said, on your tombstone, you're going to have the year you were born and the year you died, and in between there's just going to be a little hyphen, and it's that little hyphen is what matters. And I thought about that a lot, and I go, if at the end of my years, somebody said he was an amazing father, an amazing husband, I would feel like I succeeded. So for me, no, I'm not always perfect. My wife is an angel, and she deals with me. But I do know that that's my goal in life. I mean, it's really just to take really good care of my family.
Yeah. Yeah, and tell us a little bit about your son. Every time I mention your son or you bring him up, you just light up. So tell us a little bit about the boy.
Well, they say it's like anybody who's got 2, 3, 4, you probably love your first kid the most, right? I mean, that's what they said. So, I mean, this is my first. His name's Brooks. He's 3.5. And honestly, I just think that this little kid is like the coolest little guy I've ever been around in my life, and I don't deserve him. But somehow we're just enjoying him. Taking him to do fun things. Really just make sure that I'm really involved in it. So I get the chance to do that anymore. That's really important.
Yeah, that's great. And let's see, are you still getting echo?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you try that then? Because I'm wondering if we're having a little bit of a sound issue. I can still hear what you're saying, but that might be part of what's causing that.
Okay, cool.
And of course, now it's started raining on the car, so.
It's raining now?
It's raining. I don't know if you can hear that. You can hear the rain in the background, but.
Okay, can you hear me?
Say it again.
Okay, cool. I can hear you now.
Okay. So, let's see. We kind of got away from one thing that was an interesting thing that you were saying when you transitioned away from Sprint. There was an intermediate job that you were doing before you were able to go full time with DJing.
Oh yeah. So it's funny because the more you've been in business, the more you're okay to tell stories because you feel like that it's okay at this point. You've done it long enough. You've paid your dues. So whenever I first left Sprint,
I was waiting for my next, I say waiting for my next move. I knew I wanted to take this job full time, but when you say I want to take something full time, you're literally leaving a full time salary to nothing, or maybe like a handful of events that you have coming up, and you're working to build on that. So I knew I needed something to supplement my income. And honestly, like this is maybe weird, but I like interior design stuff. I love furniture. And so I saw a huge market for mid-century modern furniture, and I became like the Kansas City American picker. And I would go to estate auctions. I would just go garage sailing. I would go everywhere you possibly could go, and I would buy and sell stuff on Craigslist. And I did that for a year to supplement my income to get my business up and running. And my wife and I, we laugh about it all the time because the first year I was out of Sprint, I actually made more money than I did working in the corporate world. And it wasn't off of DJing at all. It was literally the job to get me to the DJing part. And she would come home from work all the time, and I would have like a new bedroom set, or I'd have all this crap in the car that we'd have to get out, we'd have to stage, we'd have to throw up on Craigslist. And she always would do it. Like, she hated me for it, I think, but she would always do it. She would always kind of be supportive of me when I was doing that. But honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but that and my wife just being supportive honestly helped me to get my business up off of the ground. I mean, I think you have to, when you're starting a business, you really have to have people surrounding you, supporting what you're doing. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And I look back on that now and I go, it's hilarious, but at the same time, like, I loved it. Like, I still think back on it and go, when I'm retired and old someday, I'm going back and I'm doing that again. I absolutely loved it. Yeah.
Well, and part of the reason I circled back around to that, part of what I really want to do with this show is show brides and other vendors that we're all real people. Like,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
The picture that we all put out there in the wedding industry is the finished product, right? What the planner can create, or how packed the dance floor is when we're DJing, or that kind of thing. And that's great. We need to be able to showcase that. But I feel like part of what Thursday Night Live is about showing that we're real people, that we've had real experiences, and that the life as a hyphen, kind of in a different term than what you're saying, but a lot of us end up, doing two things simultaneously as we're building a business, or even throughout our entire careers, just because we enjoy it.
Yeah.
It feeds different parts of our personality. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then you had also told me just now, you mentioned, spending time with your son obviously is a great pastime and you enjoy that. But you were very into motorcycles for many years.
I don't want to say very into motorcycles, because that sounds like I worked on them and raced them and all that kind of stuff. I enjoyed them a lot. Yes. And so, I'm one of those people that I'm always searching for more freedom. And it was funny because the first time I was ever on a motorcycle, I was just like, oh my God, like, this is not getting from point A to point B anymore. Like, I literally feel more alive than I did 10 minutes ago when I was not on this thing. So it was an addiction for me. I think I had my first bike when I was maybe 12 years old, something like that. It was a dirt bike or something. And the thing was such a hunk of crap. My dad somehow got it going. And it was just this huge piece of rust, really. And I rode that thing for like at least 2 summers. But from that point on, even in high school, I had a motorcycle. I'd ride it to school every day, and had a couple of bikes just until a few years ago, where, like we were talking about, you end up getting a little bit too busy, and you're not quite able to ride them like you want to. So we sold them.
So talk to me about, what do you feel like have been some of your biggest struggles in life or business, whichever you would prefer to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think for life, I think it's like a lot of people. I think you're always wondering, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? I say that because I think that, whenever you're a kid, you're told, hey, you go to high school, you get good grades, you go to college, you get good grades, you get out, you get a good job, and things are going to be okay. But we all know, once we get past that point, that life is evolving. It's always changing. There's things that are always coming and going. And so you really have to find something that you're just really passionate about, that you enjoy doing, and that you have longevity in. And for me, I will tell you, like, this job, there is no other job in the world I would have worked this hard for. So I can tell you that I'll be going on my 10th year in March of 2018 of doing this full time, which is a huge milestone for me. But I just can't imagine having stuck in a 10 years into a sprint or, something of that nature. So I say all that to say, just knowing, because everything is evolving, like what's next, so that's always a struggle. That's up in my head a lot. I think the other thing too is just from a business perspective, from a DJ perspective anyway, it's just finding really good talent, and kind of like we talked about before, what I do that is a little bit different is I have a very, very long process for bringing DJs in. And so it's hard for me to find people that are willing to take that journey with me. So we, even if you've had DJ experience, I take that back. If I know where you've come from and I know that it's a great place and I know that we can get you, acclimated fairly quick, you'll go through some minimal training with me. But basically, if I don't know that, and even if you have experience as a DJ, you come in and you might train with us to 6 to 8 months before we put you out on events. And you're doing that for minimal amounts of money until we know that we can 100% trust you. We know that you show up and do what you say you're going to do. And so we put a lot of time and effort into the people that work for us. But at the same time, finding people that are willing to do that is really tough. And I think that that's the only way you know that the people you're sending out are true quality is if they're willing to sacrifice that length of time for the end goal. So I would say those are probably a couple things that are, a bit of struggles. The other one, we talked about this and I forgot to bring it up, is the weekends. We work every weekend. So, a lot of times, I think as couples come to us and, they are, talking a lot with us just about doing their event. I know sometimes they don't understand like our schedules, because I have couples all the time that go, hey, yeah, can you just meet me on, I can't meet during the week that well because I got work. Can you meet me on the weekend? And I'm just like, no, like the weekends are a time that I just don't meet because we're so busy with events. So for 10 years now, it is a rarity that I get to do anything on a Saturday, and so my schedule is completely opposite of all of my friends and family. So it doesn't matter if it's family reunions. I told you I just missed out on the College World Series in Omaha because we have events going on. So that's kind of a struggle, is just knowing that there is still life outside of events, but we just have to do those at different times and trying to get people to ride my schedule sometimes as opposed to me riding theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is a struggle. I mean, that's something that almost every wedding vendor, deals with, is how to make sure that we are available during the times when couples are also available to meet, and yet balancing that with family. Like, how do you somehow, be a good husband and a good father, and especially if your spouse works a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and so it goes back to really what we're doing here is just sharing that's, for me, someone who's kind of on a different level at this point as a show producer, I don't have to work the weekends. I work 2 weekends a year and that's it. But I really want to show that heart in my vendors and show to the couples that would be watching this that to just be appreciative of that, vendors, yes, you're paying them, but it's time is more than money. And so giving up every weekend to make other people's dreams come true is a really high calling, more than a lot of people give it credit for. So, well,
and to speak to that for, just a second, I think, and I don't want to take away anything from, obviously couples coming and paying us good money to do a job. They do. And I'm so appreciative of that. But, I think that the couples, you can tell the couples that really get that and understand it and the level of respect they have for you. And when you get a couple like that, you will take their event, and not because you're not trying to do this to the other events,
right.
But you will take that event and you will try to multiply it times 10 in levels of success, because you're so appreciative that they got that and that they realize you're a human being, So it is really nice just to kind of throw out there and be vulnerable. Like, this is who we are. This is what we do. And yeah, it's tough at times, it's really tough to not only work the schedules we work, but also to be on 24/7, because when we are working, there are no chances for failure. I mean, that's not the expectation that anybody that's hired us has for us, is that we're going to fail in any way, shape, or form. So, we have to be perfect when we do work, and we have to work some crazy schedules. So sometimes that gets to be a little bit tough, for sure.
Yeah. And yet, those of us who have done it for years and years, you do learn. You have one chance, and the good news is that you've been doing that for 10 years, and I've heard nothing but amazing things about you guys. So,
we're good. Hopefully, we're trying. That's what I always tell my guys. I'm like, listen, we have a meeting every month, and I'm like, we'll never be perfect. I'm not going to be perfect as an owner. I'll never have a perfect company. You're not going to be perfect individuals. We're flawed people, right? But if we strive to be perfect, then that's all anybody can ask out of us. So if we just strive for that, I think that's a huge deal. That's what we try to do.
Okay, well, anybody here with us live that has any questions, please feel free to jump on and comment, and we can take those now. Or if you're watching this later and have questions, you're welcome to throw that at us, and Craig or I will get back with you. But Craig, I really appreciate you being here and just kind of being
thanks for having me
and sharing what you got going on. So is there anything coming up in your future other than just continuing to do an amazing job as an amazing DJ that you'd like to share?
I told you that I'm looking at doing a couple of other things. I'm not quite ready to share exactly what those things are yet. Being an entrepreneur, I'm always looking at a few different things here and there. But really, my focus right now is kind of getting Elite Sounds to a point of being I feel like we're a well-oiled machine now, but being like an extremely well-oiled machine. I'm looking for somebody to come in and take a management role with us. And, putting a lot of processes and procedures in place where our training process gets to be a little bit smoother and things of that nature. So, once again, it's me, big picture, trying to think about ways of making something a little bit better. So I would say on a business level, that's kind of where we're at. And from a personal level, I think it's just really starting to take more time for myself and my family, if that makes any sense. So I think I told you went to the Justice Drug Store, which is this amazing restaurant that's in Smithville, and I drove up to the place, and I had no idea that this awesome place would be sitting there in Smithville. Have you been there?
I haven't.
Okay, so I guess the guy that is the chef there is like a world-renowned chef or something. Phenomenal food. Okay, so we, doing that, spent some time with my wife, really trying to get back to being husband and wife a little bit. Past being parents, sometimes that's tough. So, really just trying to get some of my time back, I think, is kind of a huge deal. I worked really hard to get our business where it's at now, and I'm able to pass on some responsibilities, which has been awesome. And I don't want to get out of overseeing things at all. I definitely want to be involved in everything that we're doing. But I think really just getting to a point where I start trusting people that have devoted a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to Elite Sounds. That's okay to do. They deserve that too. So that's kind of where I'm trying to go.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now. So we will go ahead and wrap up for tonight. But again, I want to thank those of you that have tuned in. I know some of you have watched and not said anything because I have a little counter in the corner. Also, again, obviously, thank Craig for being here. And again, please feel free to like, share, and join us on Instagram as well as here on Facebook. And we look forward to seeing everybody again next week. Thanks.